The afternoon sun poured gently over the outdoor martial arts expo, a lively annual event where families gathered, kids showed off their newly learned kicks, and local fighters performed friendly demonstrations. The air buzzed with excitement, vendors selling snacks, children laughing, parents cheering. It was supposed to be a day of skill, respect, and discipline. In the center of the arena stood a man who didn't quite fit the spirit of the event, a 35-year-old black belt, tall, muscular, and radiating arrogance. He had arrived with the swagger of a man who believed he owned the place. Every time he stepped onto the mat, he didn't demonstrate. He dominated. Every match he took was treated like a battlefield. No smiles, no courtesy. Only ego. The crowd's mood slowly shifted from admiration to discomfort. He had already embarrassed two young fighters earlier, knocking them down harder than necessary, shouting in their faces, demanding applause like he was performing on a world stage. Parents exchanged uneasy glances. Coaches whispered among themselves. But no one stopped him. Then came the moment no one expected. A 16-year-old teenager, thin, nervous, yet determined, stepped onto the mat. His white belt shook slightly around his waist as he bowed respectfully. He wasn't there to show off. He wanted a chance, a friendly spar, a learning moment. But the black belt smirked. "Oh, look. Another weakling," he said loudly enough for the entire crowd to hear. People frowned. A few gasped. The boys' coach tried to intervene, but the teen insisted. "It's okay. I want to try," he whispered. The match began. The boy threw a timid jab, more of a warm-up than an attack. But the black belt's response was vicious. A sharp kick. A sweeping leg attack. A shove that sent the teen stumbling backward. People began shouting, "Hey, take it easy." But the man didn't listen. His eyes burned with the thrill of domination. Then, in one swift, brutal move, the black belt trapped the boy's arm in a lock, twisting far beyond the limit of safety. "Stop! Stop!" The crowd roared. But it was too late. Sap! A scream tore through the arena. Parents rushed forward. The teen collapsed, clutching his arm, trembling in agony. And in that stunned, horrified silence, someone in the crowd slowly stepped forward. Someone the world knew. Someone the black belt should have never challenged. Chuck Norris. Chaos erupted the moment the horrifying snap echoed across the arena. Parents screamed, coaches rushed in, and the teen lay curled on the mat, clutching his broken arm, tears streaming down his face. His cries cut through the air like a knife, raw, terrified, heart-shattering. But the man who caused it, he stood there, smirking, got hands on his hips, chest expanded, almost proud of the brutality he had just unleashed. He glanced around as if expecting applause, not outrage. A mother yelled, "Are you insane? He's just a kid." A father pushed through the barriers, eyes burning with fury. "You could have killed him." But the black belt casually shrugged, wiping imaginary dust off his uniform. He shouldn't have stepped up if he couldn't handle it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even seasoned fighters who understood the world of martial arts couldn't believe what they were hearing. This wasn't sparring. This wasn't discipline. This was cruelty, ego. A man intoxicated with his own sense of power. Coaches tried lifting the injured teen, speaking softly to him, trying to keep him conscious. His face was pale, his breathing quick, the pain overwhelming. One look and everyone knew that arm wasn't just injured. It was broken badly. Two paramedics from the event rushed in, sliding to their knees beside him. They carefully stabilized his arm, the boy whimpering with every movement. His mother held his head gently, whispering, "Stay with us. Stay with us, baby." The black belt's response? He rolled his eyes. Then, to push the tension even further, he stepped forward, raising his arms to the audience like a performer demanding attention. That's what real strength looks like. He shouted, "Anyone else want to test me?" The crowd recoiled. A grown man just broke a teenager's arm, and now he wanted challengers. A few younger students backed away, trembling. Parents positioned themselves in front of their children as if shielding them from a wild animal. Even experienced martial artists in the audience looked disturbed. But the black belt didn't stop. He pointed aggressively at the crowd. "You," he shouted at a bystander, "you look tough. Come on, step up." The man shook his head, horrified. He pointed again. "You, I'll take you down in seconds." He paced along the edge of the mat, red-faced, adrenaline-fueled, drunk on dominance. No one stepped forward. No one dared. People had seen what he could do and what he was willing to do. Some pulled out their phones, recording him, documenting every arrogant gesture, every taunt, every step he took as he prowled like a predator searching for his next victim. The crowd was boiling with anger, but also fear. A coach shouted, "Security! Remove him, now!" But security hesitated. The black belt was dangerous, and they knew it. That's when the atmosphere shifted. At the far end of the crowd, a quiet murmur started, the kind of whisper that spreads like a soft breeze before a storm. Heads turned. People moved aside. Someone older, calm, and steady was walking closer. He wore a simple jacket, jeans, and a cap pulled low. His steps weren't rushed, but every movement radiated control, the kind that only comes from decades of training, discipline, and wisdom. People exchanged glances. Is that? No, it can't be. Wait, look at his face. No way, no way. But the black belt didn't notice. He was too busy grandstanding, too full of himself to pay attention to the ripple moving through the audience. He raised his voice again. "Come on, someone step up. I didn't come here to play with children." His words sliced the air like a knife. Parents covered their kids' ears. Martial artists clenched their fists in disgust. The injured teen let out another cry as paramedics prepared the stretcher. The boy's father glared at the black belt with such fury that two coaches had to hold him back. And through all this chaos, the older man continued walking forward. Slow, calm, unshaken. Like a man who had seen battles far worse than this. A man who didn't need to shout to command a room. A man who could silence a crowd with just a look. The black belt finally noticed the shift in energy. He turned. He saw the older man stepping toward the mat, and he smirked again. "Oh, we got a volunteer, old man," he taunted. "You want to take a shot?" But the crowd didn't laugh. They didn't cheer. They didn't even breathe. They knew something. The black belt didn't single quotes T. The older man slowly lifted his head, and for the first time, the black belt saw his face clearly. Those piercing eyes. That unmistakable presence. That aura of calm dominance. A few people in the audience whispered his name under their breath. Chuck Norris. But the black belt didn't believe it, not yet. The older man didn't say a word. He simply stepped onto the mat. And the world seemed to freeze. Where are you watching this from? Which country or city? Drop it in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. Then, the real story began. The breaking point, and the moment the crowd realized something was terribly wrong. The dojo had turned into a storm. Not the loud kind, no. It was the quiet storm, the dangerous one, the kind where silence is heavier than sound. The young teen Ryan clutched his fractured arm while the ruthless black belt instructor paced the mat like a lion guarding territory. The crowd that had been cheering moments ago now stood frozen in horrified disbelief. No applause, no chatter. Just the sharp, echoing sound of Ryan's painful breathing. For a moment, Even the instructor seemed surprised at what he'd done. But the surprise faded, quickly replaced by pride. Arrogant pride. He smirked, turned to the audience, and raised both hands like he had just performed a masterpiece. "This," he shouted, "is what happens when you challenge real martial arts." Gasps rippled through the hall. A few people stepped back. Mothers pulled their children closer. Some teenage students exchanged terrified looks, suddenly questioning everything they had learned under this man. But the instructor wasn't done. He walked over to Ryan, who was trembling on the mat. "Get up," he barked. "A real fighter stands." "But his arm," one teen student attempted to say. The instructor snapped toward him. "Do you want to go next?" Silence again. The instructor bent down and flicked Ryan's forehead like he was mocking him. Like breaking a kid's arm was nothing more than a lesson, a performance, a show. Suddenly the crowd was no longer just shocked. They were angry. Wave of whispers started circulating. "Someone call an ambulance. This isn't training, this is abuse. He went way too far. Why would he break a kid's arm?" Someone at the back shouted, "Hey, enough!" Another voice, "Let the kid breathe." And someone else yelled, "Where's security?" But the instructor ignored them all. He raised his voice again. "Anyone else want to test me?" "Huh? Anyone?" He wanted fear. He hungry for dominance. He wasn't running a dojo anymore. He was running a circus. And the breaking of the kid's arm was his opening act. But the engagement of the crowd grew louder. Phones came out. People started recording. Comments were whispered with intensity. "Post this now. He'll go viral for the wrong reasons today. No mercy. Let the world see this guy." For the first time, the instructor noticed the phones. His face stiffened, not with guilt, but with irritation. He pointed at the nearest man filming and yelled, "Put that phone down now." The man didn't. In fact, he lifted it higher. And the crowd sided with him. More people hit record. More whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs turned into tension. Tension turned into pressure. The instructor took a step forward, trying to intimidate the crowd now. "You people don't understand martial arts. Weaklings. All of you." He tried to justify himself, waving his arms dramatically. "You think breaking an arm is bad? THIS is discipline. THIS is strength. This kid," he pointed at Ryan, "needed to learn a lesson." Someone shouted from the side, voice cracking with outrage, "He's a child." The crowd's anger was no longer scattered, it was unified. A storm ready to explode. But Ryan, through tears and pain, whispered, "I didn't do anything. He just attacked me." That one line hit the crowd like a punch to the chest. The instructor growled, "Shut up," and he grabbed the teen's shirt collar. That was it. That was the moment the crowd collectively stepped forward. The engagement was no longer verbal. It was physical. People surged closer. Mothers shouting, "Leave him alone. Stop touching the boy." A group of adult students tried to intervene, cautiously moving between the instructor and Ryan. But the black belt's eyes darkened, his ego now fully in control. "You think you can stop me?" he said, voice low and dangerous. "I'll put all of you on the ground." He cracked his knuckles and took a fighting stance. Nobody expected what he was about to do. He lunged again toward the same injured kid. The entire room screamed. People tried to jump forward. Some even closed their eyes. And that's when it happened. The air shifted. A presence moved. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just one firm step. And suddenly the aggressive instructor stopped, mid-motion, like he hit a wall, because someone was standing between him and the injured teen. Someone he wasn't expecting. Someone the crowd didn't even notice walk in. Someone whose aura alone made the entire audience fall silent. Boots on the mat, hands calmly by his side, face unreadable, posture relaxed, but unshakably powerful. The dojo lights reflected off his still, focused eyes, and every person in the room felt the energy shift from chaos to calm, a legendary calm. You could hear someone whisper, "Is that? No way. Impossible. It can't be him." But it was. The man who stepped out of the crowd had a presence stronger than the entire dojo combined. The black belt instructor stared at him, suddenly unsure, suddenly off balance, because standing before him was the one man no martial artist in their right mind wanted to provoke. The crowd went dead silent, phones shaking as people continued recording. The moment the legendary figure spoke, his voice was low, calm, yet the entire room felt it like thunder. "Son, you hurt that boy one more time, and you answer to me." The instructor's face went pale, because standing there was Chuck Norris. When the room stopped breathing and the instructor realized he chose the wrong day to pick a fight, the dojo had never been this silent. You could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. You could hear Ryan, the injured teen, breathing in soft, shaky gasps behind Chuck Norris. And you could hear the collective heartbeat of the crowd, fast, loud, almost vibrating the air. Chuck didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't raise his hands. He simply stood there calm, steady, radiating the kind of presence that made even the bravest men question their choices. The black belt instructor, once arrogant and chest-thumping, suddenly looked small. He blinked hard, like his eyes were lying to him. You're, he stuttered. Chuck cut him off, his voice calm but sharper than a blade. "You broke a kid's arm for pride." The instructor swallowed. "You mocked him after it." Another step. Chuck didn't need speed. He needed gravity, and the room felt it. "You tried to hurt him again." The instructor took one instinctive step back. Chuck's eyes narrowed just slightly. "But the worst part," he said, "is you called it martial arts?" A shiver went through everyone present. Mothers covered their mouths. The teenage students who once bowed to the instructor now watched him with disgust. The instructor tried to regain his confidence, puffing out his chest. "This is my dojo," he said, voice trembling despite his effort to hide it. "You can't just walk in here and—" Chuck said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence alone was louder than any threat. Instructor clenched his fists. "You think you can intimidate me because you're Chuck Norris?" The crowd gasped. Even saying that name with disrespect made the room feel dangerous. Chuck finally tilted his head slightly, studying the instructor like he was examining a problem. A very solvable problem. "This isn't about me," Chuck said, stepping forward. "It's about him." He pointed at Ryan. "It's about every student you've humiliated. It's about every parent who trusted you. And it's about every real martial artist you disgrace every time you step onto this mat." The instructor's face twisted with anger masking fear. "If you want to fight," he snarled, "then fight." The entire crowd shouted, "No," in unison, but Chuck simply exhaled, calm as water. "I'm not here to fight you," he said. "I'm here to stop you." Then the instructor snapped. Charged. Fast, aggressive, wild. Punch aimed directly at Chuck's jaw. The crowd screamed. Mothers turned away. Students covered their eyes. Phones shook as they recorded. But Chuck didn't even blink. He moved only an inch that changed everything. The instructor's punch sliced through empty air, making him stumble forward. Before he could regain footing, Chuck just tapped his shoulder. It was so fast, most people didn't even see it. The instructor collapsed to one knee, gasping, the pain shooting through his arm like lightning. Wasn't a strike, that it wasn't an attack, that it was a statement, a demonstration. Warning, Chuck stepped back. This is your last chance to walk away, he said, but the instructor's ego, the same poison that led him to break a kid's arm, flared again. Humiliation is a dangerous trigger for a man who lives on dominance. He leapt toward Chuck again. A kick this time, high. Fast. Too fast for a normal man, but Chuck Norris wasn't normal. He shifted just slightly, catching the instructor's leg midair with one hand. The dojo erupted in gasps. Chuck gently but firmly pushed the leg aside, causing the instructor to spin and crash onto the mat. The instructor growled, furious. You think you're better than me? Chuck didn't answer. He didn't boast. He didn't smirk. He simply stepped between the instructor and the boy again. The instructor's eyes filled with rage. He grabbed a wooden training staff from the weapon rack. The crowd gasped, backing away. Hey, that's enough. Someone yelled. Chuck finally sighed. You don't learn, he said softly. The instructor charged with the staff. The swing came fast, aimed right at Chuck's ribs. Chuck stepped inside the attack, placed 2 fingers on the instructor's wrist, and gently guided the staff downward. The instructor's own strength, redirected, made him lose grip. The staff clattered on the floor. Chuck placed his foot on it, preventing the instructor from retrieving it. The instructor, red with humiliation, swung a desperate backhand. Punch. Chuck caught it mid-flight. He didn't tighten his grip. He didn't squeeze. He simply held. And instructor froze, his entire body locked by a pressure point. Chuck had skillfully engaged. Chuck leaned in. Hurting a child doesn't make you strong, he whispered. It just proves how weak you truly are. Then he released the pressure point. The instructor collapsed to the mat, gasping, shaking, not from pain, but from the realization of defeat. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in relief. Some clapped. Some cried. Some recorded with trembling hands. Ryan whispered weakly, "Thank you." Chuck turned to him and knelt. "You're safe now," he said. "No one's hurting you again today." Parents rushed forward. Students surrounded Ryan, offering support. The instructor remained on the mat, unable to stand, unable to look anyone in the eye. He had lost, not to fame, not to legend, but to integrity. To real martial arts. And to the man who had just shown the entire dojo what true strength looked like. The dojo that thought it feared no one learned what honor really meant. The dojo felt like a battlefield aftermath, quiet, shaken, filled with people trying to process what they had just witnessed. Ryan was now seated on a bench, his arms stabilized with towels and belts tied around it to prevent movement. His face was pale, but he was no longer alone. Parents surrounded him. Students hovered close, whispering encouragement. Someone brought him water. Another draped a jacket over his shoulders. Across the room, the disgraced instructor knelt on the mat, trembling with shock, humiliation, and something he wasn't familiar with. Fear. Chuck stood calmly near Ryan, not posing, not boasting, simply ensuring the boy stayed conscious and comforted. Then the dojo doors burst open. 2 assistant instructors rushed in, men who had trained alongside the black belt for years. Their expressions switched instantly from confusion to horror. "What happened?" one shouted, running to the boy. Everyone started talking at once. "He broke the kid's arm." "He wouldn't stop." "He attacked Chuck Norris." "He used a weapon." The assistant instructor's eyes widened as they spotted Chuck. "Sir, Mr. Norris, wait. You were here?" Chuck gave a respectful nod. "I happened to be visiting," he said simply. Ryan's mother, who had arrived moments ago and was still shaking, looked at Chuck with tears in her eyes. "Thank you. Thank you for saving my son." Chuck placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "No parent should go through this," he said softly. "And no child should be harmed under the name of training, ever." The assistant instructors turned toward the disgraced black belt. "Stand up." One of them barked with a fury no one had ever seen from him. The black belt didn't move. He couldn't meet anyone's eyes. "Stand up." Slowly, shakily, he rose, though standing was generous. He looked like a man who had been emotionally dismantled. "What were you thinking?" The assistant roared. "You injured a minor. You almost attacked a legend. You disgraced this entire school." But the black belt snapped back in desperation. "He challenged me. He didn't respect me. He's a child." The assistant interrupted. "And you were supposed to protect him." The room murmured in agreement. Chuck spoke then, calmly. "He wanted to learn," Chuck said. "And he showed more courage than you ever did." The assistant instructors exchanged glances, then made a decision. One turned to the black belt. "You are stripped of your position," he said sternly. "You are no longer an instructor here." The dojo gasped. "But—" The black belt protested. "No, you're done," the assistant snapped. "You can explain yourself to the parents, the committee, and maybe even the police." Suddenly, the weight of reality hit the once arrogant man. You're calling the cops?" He choked. Ryan's mother stepped forward. "I already did," she said, holding her phone. "They're on the way." The color drained from his face. He wasn't just humiliated, he was trapped. He paced back and forth, breathing fast, anger and panic swirling inside him. "This isn't fair. This isn't my fault," he shouted. Chuck's voice cut through the chaos. "It's exactly your fault." The black belt jerked his head toward Chuck. "You think you're better than everyone just because you're some old martial arts icon?" Chuck walked forward slowly, steadily, without intimidation. "Just truth." "No," Chuck said. "I don't think I'm better than anyone." The room fell silent. "But every day for the last 50 years, I've tried to be better than the man I was yesterday." He looked the black belt dead in the eyes. "That's what martial arts is supposed to be." The black belt opened his mouth, but no words came out. Chuck continued, his voice controlled. "You teach discipline, but you have none. You teach respect, but you show none. You teach control, but your ego controls you." Every student in the room hung on to every syllable. Chuck stepped a little closer. "You didn't break that boy's arm because you're strong," Chuck said quietly. "You broke it because you're weak." The instructor visibly wilted, like the words themselves were too heavy to bear. Outside, sirens grew louder. The crowd shifted. The assistant instructor whispered, "They're here." The disgraced black belt turned pale. For the first time since the incident began, he looked truly scared. He tried to bolt for the back exit, but one of the parents stepped in front of him. And then another. And another. 3 grown adults blocked the way. "You're not going anywhere," one said coldly. The black belt looked around, realizing no one, not one person in that dojo, was on his side. Then he made his final mistake. He turned to Chuck Norris. "Say something," he pleaded in desperation. "Help me." Chuck shook his head slowly. "I help people who take responsibility for their actions," he said, "not those who run from them." The police entered moments later, stepping inside with calm authority as the crowd parted. They approached Ryan first, examining his arm, then speaking with his mother, then with the instructors. Finally, they approached the black belt. "Sir," one officer said, "you need to come with us." The man's knees buckled. They guided him out as the entire dojo watched silently. Chuck then turned to Ryan. "You were brave today," he said softly. "But next time you step on a mat, it will be to learn not to get hurt." Ryan nodded. Tears in his eyes, Chuck placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're going to be just fine." And for the first time since the chaos began, the boy smiled. When the cameras turned on, the world discovered what really happened inside that dojo. By evening, the dojo looked nothing like the battleground it had been hours earlier. The mats were cleaned, the equipment put away, and the crowd dispersed. But the energy lingered like a memory you couldn't shake. Outside, Ryan was being lifted into an ambulance, his mother holding his good hand tightly. The EMTs assured her, "He'll be okay. Clean break. He's lucky someone stepped in on time." Lucky was an understatement. Chuck Norris stood nearby, giving the family space but still watching over them like a guardian. Not as a celebrity, not as a martial arts icon, but as a man who refused to walk away from injustice. As the ambulance drove off, several parents approached Chuck. "Sir, thank you. You saved that boy. You protected all of our kids today." Chuck shook his head humbly. "I didn't save anyone," he said softly. "I just reminded someone what discipline really means." But the parents insisted. "No," one father said firmly. "You reminded all of us." That was the moment cameras began rolling. At first, it was only a few people recording short videos for their social media accounts. Clips of Chuck stepping in, clips of the instructor being arrested, clips of the chaotic moments inside the dojo. All began appearing online within minutes. And within minutes more, they exploded. By the time Chuck reached the parking lot, his phone started vibrating nonstop. Notifications, tags, messages, mentions. He ignored them. He wasn't doing this for views, but the internet didn't care. By midnight, the story was everywhere. Chuck Norris stops violent martial arts instructor. Team's arm broken. Chuck Norris steps in. Real hero. Chuck Norris saves child in dojo incident. Disgraced black belt arrested after attacking student. News outlets began calling the dojo owners. Journalists reached out to the boy's mother. Sports channels started replaying every shaky video frame in slow motion. The world wanted answers, but most of all, the world wanted Chuck's voice. And finally, after hours of silence, he chose to speak. Not on TV, not through a PR team, not in an interview. He walked outside his home, stood in front of a small group of waiting journalists, and spoke from the heart. The cameras clicked. Lights turned on. Microphones stretched toward him like hungry branches. Chuck raised one hand gently, signaling calm. "First," he said, "I want everyone to know the boy is okay. His arm will heal." His courage never broke. He paused. He didn't ask for trouble. He didn't challenge anything. He stepped onto a mat to learn, and he was met with cruelty instead of guidance. Silence fell over the crowd. Chuck continued, "Martial arts is not about hurting people. It's not about ego. It's not about proving you're stronger than someone else." His voice deepened with conviction. "It's about improving the person in the mirror. Every day. Just a little bit. That's all." Reporters scribbled notes as fast as their hands allowed. Another camera flicked on. "The instructor who harmed the boy didn't understand that," Chuck said. "He thought power meant control. But real martial artists know something different." He looked directly into the cameras. "Power means responsibility." Behind the cameras, small groups of parents, fans, and community members nodded in agreement. A reporter stepped forward. "Mr. Norris, do you think the instructor should face prison time?" Chuck took a breath. "That's not for me to decide," he said. "But I hope he faces something even more important than punishment." "And what's that?" the reporter asked. "Growth." The words struck the crowd softly but powerfully. Chuck continued. "If he chooses to learn from this, if he chooses to change, then maybe, one day, he can be a teacher again. A real one." But until then, a lot of healing has to happen. For him, for that boy, and for the students he misled. The journalists exchanged glances. This wasn't anger. It wasn't vengeance. It was wisdom. A second journalist raised a hand. Mr. Norris, millions online are calling you a hero. Any comment? Chuck smiled slightly, humble, genuine. The real heroes, he said, are the kids who show up to learn discipline, the parents who trust us to teach it, and anyone who chooses patience over pride. But what about the moment you stepped in? Another asked. Did you feel fear? Did you think he might hurt you too? Chuck chuckled. Fear? Of course. The cameras clicked louder. Fear isn't the enemy, he said. It's what keeps us aware. It's what tells us when someone needs help. And it's what gives us the courage to step forward anyway. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Wow." Chuck finished with a quiet, powerful tone. If a child is ever in danger and you can help safely, do it. Don't wait for someone else to act. Don't assume someone else will. We all have a responsibility. Then he stepped back. Thank you. That's all. He didn't pose for pictures. He didn't stay for questions. He simply walked back inside his home. Behind him, the reporters stood stunned. The cameras slowly lowered. The murmurs grew. The story, the message, the moment. It was bigger than the dojo. Bigger than the fight. Bigger even than Chuck. It was about doing what's right, even when fear is present. Even when ego is loud, even when no one else moves. And the world, watching from millions of screens, felt the impact. The day a dojo fell, and a new one was born. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the windows of the hospital room where Ryan lay resting. His arm was now in a proper cast, white, sturdy, and covered with encouraging messages from the students who had visited earlier. Stay strong, champion. You're braver than all of us. Come back soon. We need you. Ryan's mother sat beside him, running her fingers through his hair as he slept peacefully. For the first time since the incident, her eyes weren't filled with fear, they held gratitude. Outside the hospital door, someone knocked gently. She opened the door, and her breath caught. It was Chuck Norris, holding a small bag and a warm smile. I brought something for him, Chuck said softly. May I come in? She nodded quickly. Chuck walked in and placed the bag beside the bed. Inside was a signed pair of gloves, a personalized note, and a small black belt keychain. When he's healed, Chuck whispered, he'll earn the real one the right way. Ryan slowly woke up, blinking. Then his eyes widened. Mr. Norris. You came? Chuck sat on the edge of the chair. I told you yesterday, he said gently. You're going to be just fine. And I don't make promises I don't keep. Ryan smiled, small, but full of hope. The moment was quiet, pure, and unforgettable. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, the world had changed overnight. The story had officially gone global. News anchors spoke passionately about martial arts discipline. Parents debated safety. Instructors worldwide criticized the disgraced black belt's behavior. Thousands of martial artists reposted Chuck's speech about responsibility. Clips of him catching the instructors' kick with one hand had already reached millions of views. But something even more remarkable happened. People weren't praising the fight. They were praising the message, respect, integrity, protection of students. True martial arts values. Every major news outlet covered the story. Some dojos even began implementing new safety codes. Inspired by the incident, one headline captured it perfectly. Chuck Norris turns a violent incident into a worldwide lesson in honor. 2 days later, the dojo where it all happened held a community meeting. The once intimidating instructor was gone, facing legal consequences and mandatory hearings. His banners had been taken down, his name removed from the walls. The assistant instructor stood at the front, humbled but determined. "We failed you," their spokesperson said. "We trusted someone who shouldn't have been trusted. And we allowed ego to replace discipline. That ends today." Parents nodded. Students listened. The atmosphere was one of accountability, not anger. A moment later, a familiar figure entered quietly. Chuck Norris. The room rose to its feet. Chuck held up his hand. "I'm not here to take over," he said. "And I'm not here to criticize." He looked around, making eye contact with parents, kids, instructors. "I'm here because you all chose to rebuild instead of burying the dojo. That takes courage." One parent asked softly, "What do we do now?" Chuck smiled. "You teach with humility. You learn with patience. You protect every student like they're your own kid." He pointed toward the mats. "And you remember what these are for: growth, not pain." The room burst into gentle applause. The assistant instructor stepped closer. "Mr. Norris, would you do us the honor of giving the closing message?" Chuck took a breath. "Martial arts is not about who's strongest," he said. "It's about who chooses strength for the right reasons." He paused. "And it's about standing up when someone else needs you. If that day comes, don't bow to fear. Don't bow to ego. Bow only to respect." Silence filled the room, powerful, emotional. Then the applause came. Loud, genuine, healing. Ryan walked into the dojo again, his cast covered in scribbles. Every student cheered. His instructors greeted him with open arms. And for the rest of the world, the incident became more than just a viral video. It became a reminder that heroes don't need capes. They don't need fame. They don't need perfect timing. Sometimes a hero is just someone who refuses to stay silent when it matters. As one viral comment put it, strength is measured in punches. Honor is measured in choices. And on that day, in that dojo, the world saw both. The fight ended, but the lesson lived on.